Okay, so now we have our selection made and our mask done, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on my desaturation again. And what we're going to do now is we're going to posterize this to start the beginning of our value separation. But before we do that, I'm going to show you a couple of other things. First is I'm going to go ahead and select my hue saturation so that when I make my next adjustment layer, it will go on top of my hue saturation. So I'm going to click on this little adjustment layer icon again, and I'm going to choose levels. And right now we'll just leave levels alone. Don't worry about it just yet. And then on top of that, we're going to create the posterization one. We're going to find it right here. It's called posterize, and we'll create that up on top. And you can see it starts to posterize it. Posterization, if you're not sure what that means, all it means is that it's limiting the number of values that are available to create the image. So right now it's only using 4 tones in some grayscale version. And you can also make adjustments to your sliders. So like if I were to click here on my levels, I could come up to my level adjustment, and I could, make it darker. I could make it so that it has more white allocation. And then I can also adjust some of this to create a change in the gammas or the midtones. So first thing is first, though, I want to get my posterization at a level that approximately that I think I'd like. And I think, the more, and by the way, the more levels you have, the more realistic it's going to have, because it's literally using more tones, all the way up to 256 possible tones. And you might look at that and go, well, that's only 255, except that 0 is an actual, well, okay, it's an actual number, but it's not allowing you to do that. It's basically making you decide between black and white, which is a decision. Okay, and one other color, which is the gray. Okay, so anyway, if I go, I think probably about 6 is about the sweet spot for this elephant, I think. And now, this is not the end of it. Okay, so a lot of times people will think, oh, I'm just going to posterize it and then I'll export it or whatever. So no, what we want to do is we want to smooth it even more. So I'm going to choose my elephant layer down here, and let me also rename some of these layers. I'll go to this original layer and I will put original selection. I don't really even need this, to be honest, but I'll just keep it anyway as a backup for my elephant. And then I will say refined selection. And just remember, it's about the selection in this case. It's not about the elephant. The elephant layer is exactly the same so far. All right, so what I can do is I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'll create it as a backup, and I'll turn off that visibility. And while I have my elephant layer selected on my newest one, actually, let's go ahead and rename it, and let's call this oil paint. Yeah, oil paint. Oops, well, not oil paint. Let's do that, oil paint. Okay, so I'm going to select my elephant on the oil paint layer that I just renamed, and then I'm going to go up to my filter, and I'm going to go to stylize, and we're going to choose oil paint. And right off the bat, it starts to smooth it. And now, a lot of times oil paint is something that I don't like to use. Usually with oil paint, boy, you can tell that it's using oil paint. Like, as you can kind of see up here, it just has that oil paint look, right? Well, we're going to do something that's going to be really helpful, though, because we're not looking at it in color right now. We're looking at it in grayscale. And I want to lower this stylization to somewhere like maybe around, let's try like 4.5 and see how that goes on. And I think that might be kind of okay. Let's lower this even more down here. Let's do both of these at 4.5. And you don't need to bother turning on lighting. And because you're not turning on lighting, you don't need the scale. The scale won't matter. And the bristle detail will not matter. Okay. So let's just leave it as is like that. And I think that I might be okay with that as my initial piece. Okay, so I'll click OK. Now this is where I can see the beginnings of this getting started, and I can make some decisions about what I'm going to do with my levels and with my posterization at this point. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to levels again. I'll choose the actual little, looks like a little crown. It's my histogram. And then I think let's change white a little bit more. Let's start to get a little bit more some hot spots, I guess, maybe somewhere in there. And then let's change these gammas a little bit more so that I start getting a little bit more detail in the ear, because the ear was really flat. The other thing is that the eye wasn't there. So I think that I'm okay with this for the moment. Now, before I'm not done. Okay, this is still a lot of detail, and I want to limit the detail a little bit more. You might like this amount of detail, but I need this to be smoother. It's still a little crunchy in places. So I'm going to take my elephant, and just so that I have some of this detail captured in case I later want to go and kind of come back to add more detail, I'm going to keep a copy of this. So I'm going to duplicate this yet again, and I will call this oil paint underneath, I will call it oil paint 1-original. Okay, and then this one we're going to, and the one that's called oil paint copy, let's just hold off on that for a second. I want to show you some, I'll rename it, but I'm going to rename it in a way that makes a little bit more sense. So let's take that copy and let's do something else to it real quick. Let's make a filter up here that is a blur, and we're going to do a surface blur so that it actually will soften some of the details a bit. And then if I turn off the preview, you can see what it's doing is it's actually knocking some of the detail out. And like, I think this is approximately where I'd want it, with the radius of 15 and a threshold of maybe 10 or so. You could adjust some of these and see where a sweet spot would be. Like the more you increase the threshold, the more you're going to get something that looks like that. So if you increase the threshold, you know, you also would want to lower the radius potentially. So anyway, I think that you could change this around to kind of do whatever it is that you want to do. But if you exaggerate it too much, then what's going to happen is that you just sort of get these weird lumps and you start to lose detail. So anyway, I think that, let's see, let's try doing it like that. So we've got about a radius of 15 and maybe a threshold of 10. Let's see how that goes. And then of course you can undo your preview, and then you can also just choose not to do this. Now the other thing too that you can do is, and that was a destructive change, so I didn't use like a filter gallery to do that. So the other thing too is that while I've got this, I'm going to go back to filter, and I'm also going to choose a sharpen. Now I just put a blur on it, so you might be wondering why I'm doing a sharpen. I'm going to do unsharp mask, and it can get some of the details right with the highlights, and it gets more dramatic. This is especially good if you have something where you've got hair and you can really start to pull some of the details of hair out. So you know, this is a bit dramatic, and this, you can also see maybe why in some cases it might be useful to have duplicates of these, and then you can use blend modes. So let's just try like pulling some of this back a little bit, and so maybe in this range or something, and then I can also pull the amount down, and I can play around with this, and then I can really lower it, and I can bring it back up. I think I liked it a little bit more where it was. Let's pull it, but then you start to see like the shadows are super deep, and maybe that's good for what you want, maybe it's not. But anyway, you can really start to play around with some of these values, and then if you adjust the threshold, of course, that's also going to make a difference. And so anyway, you can see maybe why now you might want to include an unsharp mask filter on top of something that's got a surface blur, so that you can start to pull some of the what do you call it, the contrast out, so that it really starts to pop. I want to lower that back down. Now I'm going to click OK, and anyway, you could continue to play around with this a lot, but one of the things that is happening is that, you know, you still get a lot of detail in places while you're also able to knock some of the detail out. Now if I wanted to keep this kind of the way that it is, just as a backup, now I'm going to go here and rename this, and I'll call this let's call it blur dash sharpen. Let's call it unsharp mask, like that. Okay, so that layer has that effect on it. Now it's not, this is one of those things where like it's not, you know, it's not like a layer that is compounded with what's underneath, because this was destructive, so it changed that actual layer, right? Now if I wanted to see what it looked like, you know, by multiplying it or something, so, you know, or you could use it to lighten, you can also use it as an overlay, you can play around with some of these things, but ultimately right now what I want to do is I want to just duplicate this. I want to create another copy so that I can keep this unsharp mask version as a backup, and I can just turn these bottom ones off so that it's very clear to me what's happening. Now this copy, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to filter, and I'm going to choose my oil paint again. Let's go back to stylize, and we'll choose oil paint, and we are going to soften it up even more. And then this is going to begin to help us get to a different place oops, hold on, let's see. Yeah, so maybe this one is about 5, and or maybe let's see what this is at about 5. Anyway, or I could also turn it up quite a bit more, and the more I start to increase some of these, I can also increase the scale, and if I turned on lighting, I could make changes to these, and it may make a difference. I'm going to leave that alone, though. I'm just going to turn all of that stuff down and just leave that off. But you can also see like what happens when you really exaggerate some of this. And now it's starting to like lose a little bit too much definition, I think. I want to come back down. Let's maybe keep it within like the 5 range, sort of like in the halfway range. Okay, and I want to say okay. And then I can basically do that several more times. So we're going to do it another time, another time. And then you can kind of start to see how it's, you know, really starting to break those values down. Now, this might be a bit much for you. I think that's actually a bit much for me even. Let's maybe knock it back to there. And the other thing that you can do is you can come over here to levels now, and you can start to play around where to, you know, see where, you know, you want to bring out detail or remove detail, make it, you know, in the gamma areas, right? So I might have been kind of okay with it where it was, right? But I think I want to get some of the detail in there, but not too much. And so that's just that's a little bit too dark. So I think maybe, I think I might have been okay where exactly where I was, sort of. So yeah, I think I might. And I could also adjust this. If I start adding a lot more white, it becomes more contrasty. So, and you know, that might actually be okay, possibly. It feels a little bit less dismal, sort of. And then, yeah, I don't want to increase the black any more than where it was. I think I'm okay right there. So let's just say that that's our elephant for now. Now, the other thing too that I can do at this point is, before I kind of get to the next thing that I'm actually moving on to, is that I can also, if I wanted to bring out any more detail that was in the eye, let me just see what would happen if I, I'm gonna duplicate this one more time. Actually, do I want to do that? Let's see. Yeah, there's yeah, I think that this is a little bit better. So I think I'm gonna duplicate it one more time, and then I'm gonna make the last version. I'll call that. Let's see. Let's call this oil paint phase 2. Okay, and then this one that's on the top, we'll call this adjustments. Adjustments, and then I'm gonna turn all of these off, and then maybe I'll turn that original one back on. Not that one. Let's try that version. Maybe this original oil paint version. Yeah, maybe this one. So like if I have this adjustments one thing that I could try doing, I don't know if it's going to look good, but I could go to my actual mask right here while I have the mask thumbnail selected, and then I can, with my a paintbrush tool, here let's use my left square bracket. With my paintbrush tool, I'm going to make sure that black is enabled right here. So if I'm using black to paint onto a mask, then basically what I'm doing is I'm adjusting this mask, and so I'm basically removing some of that mask on this level, so I'm getting a little bit more detail up here in the eye, right? And so, and you can see that my opacity on my paintbrush is at 50%, so I'm like gradually removing it. And if I wanted to zoom in, you can see what's happening here. And don't worry that this looks pixelated, because I'm zoomed in at almost 300% right now, so no matter what I do, it's going to look pixelated right there. I think I liked it before I did that last change. All right, so, and right there I've got a little bit of the elephant's eye, whereas before it was just very dark. So it's really, you know, up to you. Like, you could create some different details in different places. Like if I wanted to also have more detail here in the trunk, I could. Right, I could start to remove some of that. I can remove any of this. I think I'm going to undo that. I think I liked having it dark right there. Okay, so anyway, you get the idea. And now I'm going to save this, and in the next part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how that you can start to separate these posterized values.